Right now, we are 4 hours into a new ceasefire in Syria, which some hope could mark a kind of a breakthrough in that nation's bloody 6-year civil war. It'd be easy to miss this story this week, as U.S. news has been full of political sniping over our nation's potential role in negotiating peace between Israelis and Palestinians someday, a pretty aspirational discussion. Meanwhile, other regional powers are actually at the table hammering out these deals in Syria, and they did it without any U.S. diplomats. Instead, the new Syrian truce deal was led by Turkish and Russian diplomats and announced in Moscow by Vladimir Putin. The Kremlin saying the Russian president broke word of the deal after speaking to Syrian President Bashar al-Assad by phone, and it paves the way to more comprehensive talks next month, not at the UN, but rather in Russia's neighboring state of Kazakhstan. And while one can argue that local players like Turkey should be more involved than a distant superpower like the U.S., in fact, you may remember that's an argument people actually in both parties were making when resisting further U.S. entanglement on the ground in Syria, there are also some political ramifications here. Russia announced it will only welcome the U.S. to their coming talks after Donald Trump becomes president. And that was before the U.S. had this afternoon's big news, the series of sanctions against Russia related to the hacking of the election and announcing the suspension of those 35 intelligence agents, which we were just discussing with David Sanger. Now, almost immediately, Russia vowing to retaliate and pledging to cause that, quote, considerable discomfort in the same areas for the U.S. Also, Russia's foreign ministry spokesman calling the current White House occupants a group of foreign policy losers. Ouch. And because we live in a world where even the most grave issues are boiled down to internet snark, get this, Russia's embassy in London tweeting this attempt at a digital smackdown, quote, President Obama expels 35 Russian diplomats in Cold War deja vu, as everybody, including the U.S. people, will be glad to see the last of this hapless administration, end quote, but picture included, as you can see, of a lame duck. It raises the question, are you any good at diplomacy if you find yourself reaching for animal cartoons to pull off your latest Russian burn? Joining us now for a slightly more serious conversation is a ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, California Congressman Adam Schiff. Good evening.
Good evening.
I will not ask you to comment in any way on the duck tweet. What I will ask you is to pick up on some of what the New York Times' David Sanger was saying, which is that these are meaningful moves today, but many of them, he said, are symbolic. Is that your view?
I think they are meaningful. I would say they're more than symbolic. It's a serious step to be dispatching about 40 Russian intelligence agents masquerading as diplomats in diplomatic facilities in the United States. But nonetheless, I would agree that the administration is going to need to do more. I think the Congress is going to need to do more because I don't have that much confidence in the president-elect doing anything at all. And if we're serious about deterring the Russians, I think we're going to have to make them feel some economic pain. There are also steps I hope the administration is taking that it's not announcing today. Those are covert steps to basically shoot across the Russian bow, let them know that two can play at this game, and there are things that we can do to make Putin's life difficult and that of his cronies, and those may have an equally important deterrent impact.
And what is your view of what that should look like? Understandably, it's covert, so some of it's not going to be discussed, but let's be clear about categories. If the idea is a proportionate response, certainly that wouldn't automatically mean tampering with their election or the information used in their election. And in past administrations in American history, efforts by the CIA or others to interfere in other countries' elections, democratically or otherwise, are pretty widely criticized.
Oh, no, you're absolutely right. No, we don't want to have the same response to what they did in the United States. They're doing a pretty good job dismantling their own democratic institutions. The last thing we would want to do would be to help them in any way. Rather, we could take steps to expose, for example, the corruption of both Putin personally and a lot of his cronies, the economic theft from the Russian people. That's not something, frankly, that the incoming Trump administration could easily undo. And that's something that would reflect badly, that would weaken Putin. So that's one potential step. There are a number of others that I won't discuss. But there's a wide range of things that we, I think, ought to undertake, that the Russians would understand exactly who is doing it and why. But they're not things that we necessarily need to broadcast.
What is the key evidence that is still left to declassify on this, in your view?
Well, here's where I guess I would part company with David, and that is We could make a clear showing of proof to the American people, and I think we ought to share as much as we can. But we're not going to burn our sources of information. We're not going to alert the Russians to what our technologies are. That would certainly be in the Russian interest. It's not in our interest. And this is why I think what Donald Trump is doing right now is so destructive, not only to our own country, but to the success of his own presidency. And by that I mean there's going to come a time when President Trump is going to have to come before the American people and explain why he's going to take action vis-a-vis, and it could be Russia or Iran or North Korea or China. And he's going to want to say that this is on the basis of the intelligence he's received, and he's not going to want to have to share that intelligence. So for him to belittle the quality of the work the intelligence community does will ultimately belittle his own presidency, his own effectiveness, and call it into question. So he's already, I think, damaging the country, but he's also going to damage his own potential success.
While I have you, there's another topic that is so significant but rarely discussed, something you've worked on, something Rachel Maddow wrote a book about, the expansion of the military powers of the United States absent any oversight or control. You have been advocating for some time that there should be a new authorization of force, or one that actually condenses or cabins some of the U.S. Footprint out there. What do you think about all that now with the new administration coming in and, frankly, those efforts not having gotten traction in Congress with either party?
Well, it's all the more important now. And, I think history will be very kind to the Obama administration. But this is one area that it won't, and that is the administration didn't work hard enough, I think, with Congress to encourage Congress to pass a new authorization to use force. Now, I think the administration took the view, and I can understand it, that they shouldn't want this more than the Congress, because it's the Congress's own institutional authority that's being eroded. And they were exactly right about that. But nonetheless, the administration's broad interpretations of these old authorizations going back to 2001 and 2002 are going to mean that Donald Trump can come into the Oval Office and can wage war just about anywhere, as long as he claims it's against al-Qaeda or its successors, and point to the Obama administration as precedent. So that's a very dangerous thing. I think there may be a great many Republicans now who wish they had been more serious about this issue also, because they probably are going to have grave concerns about Donald Trump having free rein to make war without the approval of Congress. So this is a real problem. I would hope we would get back at it again with a renewed determination, because this could ultimately be a decision of war or peace, and there are few of greater consequence for the Congress.
And as you say, President Trump could point now to bipartisan Democratic and Republican legal precedent for that based on this administration in part. Congressman Adam Schiff, ranking member of House Intel, thank you for joining us on a busy day.
You bet. Thank you.
Now, coming up, what are President Obama's plans starting at noon, January 20th? I think it's actually a pretty interesting question. The person who literally has the job fulfilling the president's top priority after leaving office is here tonight with us. Straight ahead.